Doctors Foreman, Richardson, Caro, and Karen Redliner. Very appreciative of their years of service. And I also now want to welcome our 4 new board members, Doctors Acquista, Lindsay, Salerno, and Galvez. And I would also like to note that this will be Pam Breyer's last meeting on the Board of Health for New York City. Pam, we're so grateful to you for your many years of service, for all of your wisdom, for all of your expertise that you've contributed over these years. And at the end of our meeting, I'd like to create a few minutes for Pam to say a few words in her final Board of Health meeting. So if that's agreeable to everyone. So we'll start with a roll call. Are the following members present? Dr. Angelo Acquista.
Present.
Pamela Breyer.
Present.
Dr. Maida Galvez.
Present.
Rosa Marie Gill. I think she's at the conference, as is Dr. Sydney Hankerson is at the State Mental Health Conference. Dr. Mitch Katz.
Here.
Hi, Mitch.
Hi.
Dr. Simona Kwan.
Here.
Dr. Michael Lindsay, I think also at the conference.
No, he's here. He's just
Oh, hi, Mike. Very good. And yep, go ahead. And Gail Naileth.
Present.
And Dr. Judy Salerno.
Present.
Very good. Welcome and thank you.
Can we just hear where the new board members are from? I mean, I know Judy, but I don't know the other board members. Maybe Gail would like to know too. Maybe Gail, you already know them.
Could we have the new board members just introduce themselves and say their names and their institutions?
Oh,
Dr. Acquista.
Angelo Acquista, affiliated with Northwell Health.
Thank you. Dr. Galvez.
Good morning, all. Maida Galvez. I'm an environmental pediatrician at Mount Sinai.
Very good. Dr. Salerno.
President Emeritus of Judy Salerno of New York Academy of Medicine and senior scholar there. Thank you.
Very good and welcome. And Dr. Michael Lindsay, if you're able to.
Hi, Mike. Yes. Hi, Michael Lindsay. I am at NYU and I'm Dean of the Silver School of Social Work. Can you all hear me?
Oh, yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Wonderful.
Again, thank you so much for being here and welcome to your first Board of Health meeting. I'll be very brief in my update. There's been a lot going on the last week in particular, but in the last several weeks have really once again brought to the fore that climate change is a public health issue. I'm extremely proud of our city, of all agencies that came together to respond to really what was an unprecedented deterioration, and unprecedented in its scale and unprecedented in its speed of deterioration of air quality in New York City from wildfires in Canada, thousands of miles away. We, in speaking with colleagues from California, Oregon, that deal with these fires more regularly, in speaking with the colleagues from the National Centers on Environmental Health, the CDC, to a person, they're all in agreement that this was quite the event, but we recognize that this may be part of the new normal. And so as we come down from that severe deterioration of air quality, really re-examining our protocols, our communication, our thresholds, our guidance to New Yorkers, and how we get that guidance out there is top of mind for everyone at the health department and all of our sister agencies. So wanted to just start there. Last week, we also had and I just came from a similar state convening on the role of social media as a public health threat to youth mental health. And we had an amazing convening last week, despite the air quality event. Almost 150 people came together at the Rockefeller Foundation to really start to unpack the nature of this exposure, which is currently entirely unregulated, and its impacts on the well-being of our young people. I think that a lot of the solutions will end up lying in public health in the same way that we have addressed tobacco and air quality and water quality and lead and environmental exposures. This is a digital toxin in our social environment, and the tools of public health, many of which live here in the health code and under the purview of the Board of Health, I think will become increasingly important. So more to come on these issues, and in keeping very much with the mayor and our administration's commitment to addressing the youth mental health crisis as a part of our overall mental health plan. On the COVID front, as you know, the end of the public health emergency happened in between the last Board of Health meeting and now, and the news is largely good. Despite slight upticks in transmission detected in wastewater, we are not seeing any meaningful effect and impact on disease, on hospitalization, on severity of illness, and certainly not on mortality. And that is all really good news and reflects the fact that we have enough population level immunity after 3 years to begin to live with COVID in a way where we can get on with our lives and incorporate the many, many tools we have, vaccination, testing, treatment, and the like, into our daily lives as we would for many, many other infectious diseases. And so I think the news is very good. And then lastly, we're entering Pride Month, or we're in Pride Month, I'm sorry. And of course, that brings up memories from last year's Mpox outbreak. This city, deserves a lot of credit. This agency and all of our partners deserve a ton of credit for the response last year and the fact that we vaccinated over 100,000 New Yorkers with the Mpox Jynneos vaccine has left us in a much stronger position to stave off any major outbreak. We don't predict that there will be a major outbreak of Mpox this year, but of course, we're redoubling our efforts with our state partners to encourage people who have not completed their full series, their second dose, to go get their second dose, and at-risk New Yorkers who haven't yet gotten vaccinated to go do so. And that's going very well. We are hosting a briefing tomorrow with elected officials to that end as well. So all to the good, a lot going on. There's more to cover, but I'll keep going in the interest of time. So with that, let's move to the approval of the minutes from the February 9th, 2023 meeting. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
No corrections.
None, no.
Okay, very good. If there are no corrections, we can move forward to the minutes. Can I have a motion to approve them as distributed and amended?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Very good. Any
Aye.
opposed? Good. The minutes from February 9th meeting are approved as distributed and or amended. Items on our agenda today. Our first topic on the agenda is the notice of adoption to amend Article 203 of the New York City Health Code regarding terminations of pregnancy. Our presenter is Dr. Gretchen Van Wy, Assistant Commissioner and City Registrar within the Bureau of Vital Statistics in the Division of Epidemiology. And now I'll turn it over to Gretchen.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Welcome to our new board members. I'll just say a little bit about myself. I am somebody who comes to the board. The Bureau of Vital Statistics comes to the Board of Public Health periodically because many of the processes that exist in our vital records and vital statistics are governed by what's in the health code. So anything related to a birth, a death, a termination of pregnancy, or any of the forms that's used to collect the information actually needs to be approved by the board. So that's just a little bit of why you'll be seeing me here. So today I'm here to speak about something that we introduced earlier this year. Next slide, please. In the context of Dobbs versus Jackson, when the Supreme Court eliminated the constitutional right to abortion. It gave, because of that event, states alone had the full power to regulate abortions. And New York City and New York State took legislative action to protect abortion patients and those helping patients access abortions. So as part of that, we reviewed the Health Code Article 203 provisions, which are related to abortions and miscarriages, and drafted an amendment for stronger confidentiality and disclosure protections. Next slide, please. So at the February 9th Board of Health meeting, we proposed amending Health Code Section 20307 pertaining to the confidentiality and disclosure of miscarriages, which are also referred to as spontaneous terminations of pregnancy or STOPs, and abortions, also referred to as induced terminations of pregnancies or ITOPs. We did this in order to eliminate the compelled disclosure requirement for STOPs and ITOPs, and to allow the commissioner or the commissioner's designee to approve inspection for scientific and lawful purposes. Next slide, please. The notice of intention was published into the New York City Record on February 17th of this year, and a public hearing was held on March 21st. Nobody testified at the hearing. We did receive 4 written comments. 1 comment was not responsive, and 2 were general notes and support. The 4th comment suggested 2 change to the proposed amendment. The first recommendation was that lawful purpose should be changed to in accordance with the laws of New York State and New York City. And the second was that a requirement that all records viewed for scientific purposes be de-identified. Next slide, please. So 2 changes have been made to the proposed amendment. And so a minor modification to 20307A to add a reference to federal law, and then an addition of language that precludes the disclosure of identifiable information for the inspection of medical reports and the release of certificates for scientific purposes. That was the practice, but now it's codified. So next slide, please. This is how the new amendment will read. I'll just give everybody a moment to read through. You'll essentially see the header, which is for subsection 20307. You'll see part A and part B. The new portions are underlined. The pieces that are taken out are in those brackets. And the red parts are parts that we made changes to subsequent to the hearing and the test to the comments received. And then you see this C is completely redacted or taken away because it's unnecessary at this point. Okay, go ahead we can go to the next slide, please. So today I'm here to ask for the board to adopt the proposed amendments to Article 203. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions?
I just have one question.
Sure.
While they may not be considered abortions, are DNCs covered?
So DNCs can be used, it's if there's a pregnancy and it's being terminated that it's covered. DNCs can be used for other medical procedures. And so it's only if there's a pregnancy that's associated.
Okay, thank you.
This is Michael Lindsay. I have a question.
Sure.
So this would eliminate law enforcement agencies from obtaining spontaneous termination of pregnancy information. Would that also include government agencies, not including law enforcement?
Well, it's really, this proposed amendment would allow for the commissioner or the commissioner's designee to review the request and within the laws of the state and the city to provide confidential information, like to provide information as needed. I mean, if there's something that's subpoenaed, that's one thing, but it would be, the idea here is to protect people coming from maybe external states and coming to New York City for services where people are governed by the laws and the rules of New York City. So there have been cases in other jurisdictions where women have presented at emergency departments and been had to navigate difficult sort of anti-choice rules and laws. And so this would just be so that those individuals, to prevent those individuals from sort of being followed across state lines. That's sort of, if that helps.
Mhm. New York City laws or New York State laws too?
Well, it's sort of that cascade, right?
Yeah,
Because the
okay.
city falls within the state. Yeah.
Mhm, okay.
Hi, Gail. You're on mute.
Thanks so much. Good morning.
Good morning.
I just want to thank you all for moving this so quickly. It's the
Yes.
anniversary of the Dobbs decision, and I think it's important protections for women. And if no one else has any questions, I'd love to move this forward with a motion.
I second it.
this-
I mean, second. Well, unless there's more.
Are there any other questions at this time?
I just
Okay,
want to,
yeah,
I
so-
want to just underscore what Gail just said. I like the changes. I like the fact that we have it ready to go. It's good protection.
Okay. Thank you, Pam. So we have a motion on the floor to pass the adoption of the amendments to Article 203.
So moved.
Second,
Okay, can I get a vote from each member? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any against? Okay, so with the unanimous vote, in favor of the motion carries. On to the next item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is a proposal to amend Article 11 of the New York City Health Code regarding reportable diseases. Our presenter is Dr. Celia Quinn, Deputy Commissioner of the Division of Disease Control, and I'll turn it over to Celia now.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and nice to meet the new board members as well. Like Gretchen, I'm often a frequent flyer of the board requesting changes to our reportable diseases. So if you can go to the next slide. Today, we're bringing forward a proposal to require laboratories to report all positive alpha-gal syndrome and carbapenem-resistant organism test results. Next slide. So I'll start by talking about the alpha-gal syndrome reporting. Next slide. So what is alpha-gal syndrome? So this is an allergic reaction that results from exposure to the alpha-gal sugar molecule. And this is a molecule that's found in most mammalian meats and also products made from mammals. It's not found in humans and certain other primates, fish, reptiles, or birds. This syndrome can affect any age group, but so far, most cases have been reported in adults. And we have a picture of the alpha-gal sugar molecule on this slide. Next slide. So why we are interested in alpha-gal syndrome is because of how it's acquired. So in the US, most cases are reported in southern, eastern, and central regions. And evidence suggests that alpha-gal syndrome is triggered by the bite of a Lone Star tick. And that's because the alpha-gal molecule is found in the saliva of Lone Star ticks, which feed on other mammals that have the alpha-gal molecule. When they feed on people, the alpha-gal leaks from the mouth into the wound, along with an enzyme that works as an adjuvant. And that combination is what causes the person's immune system to be prompted to remember and pursue alpha-gal. And we have this picture of a Lone Star tick here. Next slide. So when a person's experiencing the alpha-gal syndrome reaction, it's causing a potentially life-threatening allergic reaction. And what happens is that the symptoms typically appear 2 to 6 hours after eating meat, dairy, or other products that contain alpha-gal molecule. And people who have alpha-gal syndrome may not have an allergic reaction after every exposure, but it's thought that additional tick bites after a diagnosis of alpha-gal syndrome has the potential to increase the severity of the immune response. Next slide. So how this syndrome is diagnosed is through a detailed patient history and then also a blood test that a physician can order to look for antibodies specific to the alpha-gal molecule. And sometimes providers will also recommend allergy skin testing, but in the case of our proposal, we're only asking for reporting of the antibody test from the blood test. And once a person is diagnosed, the treatment requires removal of red meat and other mammalian products from the diet. And in severe cases of reaction, epinephrine and emergency care are required to treat that reaction. Next slide. So, I mentioned that this is caused by bites of ticks, and the health department does do tick surveillance annually. We do have Lone Star ticks in New York City. They've been found in Staten Island and parts of the Bronx, including Pelham Park Bay and Hunter Island. And we know this tick is also present in many other areas of New York State and in other neighboring jurisdictions. Next slide. So, there's a lot that's not known about the national disease burden of alpha-gal syndrome. However, a national case definition was created in 2022 that can be used to define and count these cases in a standardized way across jurisdictions. But until this is fully implemented, the overall burden is not well known. That said, the number of confirmed cases in the US rose from 12 in 2009 to 34,000 in 2019. So this is an increasing problem, and more reporting will help us understand it better. Next slide. So the rationale for the proposal is to require the reporting of tests for positive blood test results for alpha-gal syndrome to improve our knowledge of the incidence and prevalence and demographics of the populations that are being impacted, to enable targeted education and outreach about tick bite prevention to neighborhoods where cases reside and to providers who take care of those communities, and to inform our ongoing tick surveillance and tick control programming. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to move on now and change topics to talk about carbapenem-resistant organisms. Next slide. So currently, since April 2018, the Health Code has required laboratory reporting of one type of carbapenem-resistant organism, which is carbapenem-resistant Enterobacteriaceae, which is called CRE. Next slide. But CRO includes a bunch of other bacteria that are resistant to carbapenems in addition to CRE. These are organisms that are resistant to commonly used antibiotics, and that really limits treatment options. These infections usually occur in hospitals, in nursing homes, and just generally high acuity healthcare settings. And the people who are most at risk for this kind of infection is a patient whose care requires indwelling devices like ventilators and catheters, or people who are taking long courses of certain antibiotics. And in 2019, CDC classified certain carbapenem-resistant organisms an urgent threat to public health. Next slide. So although data are limited regarding the national burden of CRO overall, we know that outbreaks can result in hospitalization, medical complications, and death. And a couple of examples include that carbapenem-resistant Acinetobacter caused an estimated 8,500 infections in hospitalized patients and 700 deaths in the US in 2017, which is the most recent year for which national data is available. And you may have heard this is an ongoing outbreak that has been in the news, but CDC is investigating an outbreak of carbapenem-resistant Pseudomonas, which is associated with the use of artificial tears. And in this national outbreak, there are at least 81 patients in 18 states, and it includes some cases in New York City. Among this group of patients, people have experienced vision loss, other complications, and even death. And this particular strain of carbapenem-resistant Pseudomonas had not previously been reported in the US. Next slide. So, we currently have somewhat limited knowledge of the overall carbapenem-resistant organism burden other than CRE because of the lack of reporting. The annual number of reported CRE cases among New York City residents has steadily increased, though, since CRE first became reportable in 2018, with a preliminary total of over 1,100 last year in 2022. And although reporting of other CROs is not currently required, we do have one lab voluntarily reporting. They reported 40 of the carbapenem-resistant Pseudomonas and 97 of the carbapenem-resistant Acinetobacter in 2022, in addition to 80 CRE cases. So just kind of suggesting that the burden of these other CROs may be comparable to CRE. Next slide. So our rationale for this proposal is that reporting of all test results that are positive for CROs will inform targeted public health action and combat continued spread of these organisms. Having case reports will help us to improve our understanding of the incidence and prevalence of these organisms and infections in New York City. Will provide vital epi information regarding the transmission and evolution of carbapenem-resistant organisms, and it will help us to identify cases and outbreaks so that we can ensure rapid implementation of infection control precautions to stop the ongoing spread during an outbreak scenario. Next slide. So at this time, we're we're open for some questions and to have some discussion about this proposal.
Could you, I read this material and I guess the Pseudomonas name just, I must have, I don't know, it washed over me. And I was infected with Pseudomonas about 5 years ago, which was one of the worst medical experiences of my life. But can you just say a little bit more about it in terms of what gets reported now in some way? And has that been tracked at all over the past by
Sure.
the health department?
Yeah, so Pseudomonas is one of bacteria that can develop carbapenem resistance. So what happens is the bacteria can acquire the ability to evade the bacteria. And so we are not getting reports currently of resistance for those organisms. And that's what this proposal is trying to help us understand.
No, that I understand.
Yeah.
That I understand, but you have not been tracking any. I just was wondering if you could, it's not completely germane, but if you could say anything else about what data you have been keeping track of with this.
Right. So we get some information about hospital-acquired infections through hospital reporting, but overall,
right,
generally is not reported by like lab reporting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the board or comments?
Certainly sounds like a reasonable thing to do.
Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the notice of intention for Article 11 of the New York City Health Code for publication and comment?
Motion made.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. Okay, with unanimous vote in favor of the motion carries. On to the final item on our agenda, which is the approval of a resolution of the Board of Health related to virtual participation in Board of Health meetings due to extraordinary circumstances. Our presenter is Lisa Landau, General Counsel at the Health Department, and I'll turn this meeting over to Lisa now.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning to all board members, and welcome to the new board members joining us this morning. Next slide, please. So before you is a resolution authorizing the limited use of video conferencing for individual board members under extraordinary circumstances. Next slide, please. So many public bodies have been meeting remotely during the COVID emergency, as this one has. But because the emergency in New York City actually expires this month, excuse me, all future board meetings are required to be in person as they had been pre-pandemic. So the resolution before the board today focuses on the circumstances that afford members the opportunity to participate virtually in the related process. The open meetings law, the state law governing meetings of public bodies, was amended in 2022 and includes a provision that gives public bodies like the Board of Health the opportunity to allow a member of the public body to participate virtually in a public meeting under extraordinary circumstances. Next slide, please. So the law requires that the public body adopt a resolution setting out the parameters for members to participate via video conference. A public hearing has already taken place. And the extraordinary circumstances include disability, illness, caregiving responsibilities, or other significant or unexpected factors precluding the member's physical attendance at the meeting. The process spelled out in the resolution before you today is notification to and approval by the Secretary of the Board, Roz Winholtz, no later than 4 business days in advance of the meeting, or shorter in emergency circumstances. And just to say that notwithstanding this video conference exception, the board must meet in person with a quorum present for the meeting to go forward.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide, please. So we ask that the board approve the resolution authorizing the limited use of video conferencing under extraordinary circumstances. Are there any questions? Happy to answer.
This is Mitch. I don't have any questions. Just we too, for Health and Hospitals, have been looking at this and discussing it. And I guess just to flesh it out so people know, on a positive side, it allows, someone who wants to participate and who, can't to participate. On the somewhat negative side, you still have to maintain a quorum at the public spot. And so it doesn't help you to maintain quorum. And
Right.
there has at least been some concern that the provision might make it harder to achieve quorum.
Oh,
Because people, it gets to the question of, how tough you want to be on deciding what constitutes extraordinary circumstances. And if you have multiple board members who raise, I want to participate, I want to be part of it, but I can't because of this or because of that, and then you don't have quorum because the quorum is required. So I'm not speaking for or against. I'm just fleshing out that many of us would have preferred that the state law would have been written that if there's an extraordinary circumstance, it would have constituted quorum. But without that, I think any group that does this will have to watch to see whether it impedes reaching quorum.
Yeah,
I
well
think
said,
that it
Mitch.
also- yeah, and I think that it also creates a reminder for us about how we handle the scheduling of the meetings and an expectation that we're all present, which is very positive in one way, because it would be nice to see board members a couple of times a year so we could do our business in person. And so that would be nice. I am a little nervous about this quorum issue, and I want to just ask a point of information following up on Dr. Katz's point about the state law. So this proposal comes from the state law, and so the issue around quorum, in-person quorum versus virtual quorum is something that's specified in state guidance?
Correct. It's state law, right? It's the open meetings law. Yes.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up on Gail's point, I do know of one other not-for-profit entity, namely the Brooklyn Public Library, that has adopted this practice, but I'm pretty sure that they, in their material, because my husband is one such case, I'm pretty sure that they, toward the quorum, they count the person or people who are not able to attend but are attending, virtually. Is there some way in which, Lisa?
Yeah, Pam, I'm going to just say that it may be because it is not a public body, and it's
That could
not
be, yeah.
but the law
Yeah.
is very clear that in application to this Board of Health and other public bodies, similar public bodies, as Mitch was describing, it's not maybe optimal, but it kind of bringing us back to where we were, I think, pre-pandemic. That's the purpose of the law. So I think it does remain to be seen how it pans out. I totally agree. It's good that
Thank you.
Lisa, as part of this, are you, and again, I'm just reflecting the discussions we've had at Health and Hospitals. How are you going to determine whether or not someone's reason for not being there constitutes the criteria? That was something we were very concerned about, creating what might seem an arbitrary process, or one of the things that I liked least about this for Health and Hospitals was I didn't want to be the arbiter of whether or not one of my board members had an extraordinary or not extraordinary reason. Because life is complicated, and what one person thinks is extraordinary is not always what somebody else thinks is extraordinary.
Yeah, I agree. So I think that maybe where we need to go, we've set out some of the categories, and to your point, there may be more that aren't set out specifically, in illness, caregiving responsibility, disability. I mean, those are sort of the obvious ones, but there could be other things that come up. So I think it's something to be watchful of, in the coming meeting and other meetings. And so we could, reassess as we move forward. But I think obviously too, we can let folks know if we're not making quorum, before the next meeting with physical presence, and then kind of go from there. So it's certainly important to underscore this definition that will remain to be seen to be fleshed out a little bit more.
Lisa, one last question. Because we're going to be going back to in-person meetings, we'll still be live streaming the proceedings, and will there be room for the public to come to in person to the meetings?
Yes. So on both fronts, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And I appreciate all of the board's comments. These are all things that we've wrestled with as well internally, same sorts of questions. One thing that I hope will help is that, barring any extraordinary circumstances on the part of the city, we should be able to announce meeting dates well in advance, give people a lot of preparation on their end. To schedule these in. Over the last several years, it hasn't been possible to do that with the number of meetings we've had to hold, the number of the amount of rulemaking we did in the pandemic. I think that should abate a little bit. Number two, that with that advanced planning, as Lisa mentioned, and if any sign of lack of quorum becomes apparent, that we can take the step of course, rescheduling the meeting as necessary, which, given that we are not, most of the things we're talking about here are non-emergent, on our end is doable, and something we're happy to be flexible about. This is a brave new world, and we have to learn how to adapt technology into our convenings, and yet abide by law. And I don't think the law is necessarily caught up with where human beings are at. We just had a great meeting yesterday with the mayor on the city workforce in this regard, and opportunities for innovation and behavioral science to guide innovation. And one of the things that's become clear is that there are just these new archetypes of expectations that people have of the workplace. And this is no different. You come here to offer your expertise as work. And so I think in good faith as well, I think from our point of view, I think we intend to be as flexible and adaptive as possible, and in good faith and almost in an honor system, really trust you all to do the same as you employ the notion of extraordinary circumstances rather than adjudication. As Mitch said, I don't want to be in that position either, nor does Lisa or anyone on my team. Rather, in good faith, asking you to really only employ that when you feel like it's absolutely necessary. So we'll work through this together, and we'll certainly amend this as new kinds of categories and situations arise. But of course, this puts us in compliance with state law, which is the main driver behind this. Any other comments or thoughts? Okay, so
I'd like to move. I'd like to move the vote on this proposal, on this resolution. So I
yes,
move to
very good.
Adopt. Okay.
Can I have a second?
Second.
And a vote from each member. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, very good. The motion carries. And that concludes our business for the day. I'd like to end by giving the floor over to Pam Breyer for some closing remarks, and then we will conclude our meeting.
Thank you, Ashwin. So I was thinking about it that the other day. So it's been like 21 years that I've served on the Board of Health. And my thought in stepping down from it was essentially that nice people know when it's time to leave. And 21 years has been a privilege and an honor, and it is time to leave. So welcome to the new board members. I think I've heard a little about each of you, and I'm sure you will be wonderful, splendid board members. So actually, I have served under, let's just see here, 1, 2, 3 mayors, but 6 health commissioners. And I would say that the first one and this present one are the standouts, as far as I'm concerned, in health commissioners. Not that the others were slouchy, but it's been especially rewarding to be able to be on the board over this last 18 months. So thank you, Commissioner, for letting me continue my service. When I first got on the Board of Health, the council at the time, who was council for a long time, gave a lecture really to all of the board members, telling us that our job was not to oversee the operations of the health department. Our job was to promulgate laws and regulations. Quite a bit of authority for a board like this, and for the most part, we kept that in mind as we went along. The first couple of standout acts that the board took was to regulate where and where not you can smoke tobacco, and followed by regulations about posting calorie counts and salt limitations, which is quite extraordinary and quite exciting. And then I would say that the real standout act by this board, the previous Board of Health, was the adoption of a resolution about racism and public health. And it came in response to some community advocacy to reduce racism and in healthcare. And the trick was really to adopt the resolution, but not just to promulgate a resolution, but to come up with action steps that would help make that happen. But of course, since the Board of Health does not do those kinds of things, it's not in its jurisdiction, we asked the department and the health and the council to do that. And I'm sure you will be hearing reports about that as time goes on. It was a wonderful opportunity to get to opine on that. And it's something that I feel really good about as one of the highlights of my time on the Board of Health. So, Ashwin, you know, I want you to stay for another, how many years are there left? 6.5 years. That's my wish for the city. We will see what happens. Only time will tell. But I think that the board is positioned to continue its fine tradition of protecting the health of New Yorkers. And I'm very pleased that your counterpart at the, not really counterpart, but the person who is responsible for hospital care and more, we have not gone through as many presidents of HHC, I don't think, because, and then we're happy that Mitch is still on the board. Mitch, I'm happy you're still available to be on the board by virtue of your position. So I think that's all I really want to say. This is just an extraordinary privilege to be allowed to play some small role in the health department and the Board of Health's responsibilities for protecting all of the functions that make people healthy. And it does take more than medicine. And that's really what the health department is about at this point, which is a wonderful move in the right direction. And I will close by saying again, thank you. Thank you.
Well, Pam, I just want to thank you for your service and for your colleagueship over so many years now. I have served and followed in your shadow for so long, and you have been such a beacon of light on so many levels in health and public health and community relations in every job that you've held. And you're a real role model for me. So I love your leaving with grace, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Gail. How nice. How nice. Thanks.
Any other comments or thoughts? I'll just end by saying thank you, Pam. You're an inspiration. You're a credit to this city, a credit to this Board of Health. One thing is clear, you care deeply. You care deeply about New York City. You care deeply about health and all of its elements. And your service, your grace, your wisdom, your counsel is, while you may be leaving the Board of Health, those things are still available in spades. As long as you'll take my call, I'll be calling you. I'm sure Mitch and everyone else around here will do the same. And God bless you. Thank you for your service. The city thanks you. And
thank you.
All the
We
best.
love
And
you,
no one
Pam.
mentioned what?
We love you, Pam.
Oh,
We do.
I love you. Well, you know, no one even mentioned that I nag people a lot, but I'm trying to get a little, not much, but I'm trying to get a little better. Thank you so much, really. It's a privilege.
Thank you. Okay, and that
All right.
concludes our meeting. Thanks.